Welcome to our annual Year in Review, Year Look Ahead webinar. This is an opportunity for representatives from each of our divisions at PERB to discuss what we thought was significant about 2025 and what our constituents should keep in mind for 2026. 2025 was a big year for PERB, and as a result, this session will be a little longer than normal, running about an hour and 15 minutes. A few highlights of the year included opening our permanent office in Oakland State Building and transitioning our IT to fully in-house instead of using a contractor. We are also very proud to unveil new training videos that were posted to our website last year. This project included every division at PERB and allows viewers to become more familiar with our processes. If you have not checked them out yet, be sure to do so. They can be found on our website at www.perb.ca.gov on the Resources tab. These are just some of the projects that impacted the entire department, but I will let the panel members talk more about the work they accomplished throughout last year in their respective divisions. I am Susan Davey, Executive Director at PERB, and I will be moderating the panel today. We will not be taking questions live, but if you want to know about something we did not discuss, you can always email us at perbquestions@perb.ca.gov. Joining us today on the panel are Eric Banks, Chair of the Board, Felix De La Torre, General Counsel, Eric Koo, Chief Administrative Law Judge, and Jerry Fetcher, Director of State Mediation and Conciliation Services. Let's get started. Our first question. 2025 was certainly an interesting year for PERB. There were changes at the federal level that impacted PERB. We worked on a record number of strikes and added 2 new jurisdictions, while the normal day-to-day work did not let up. If you could each describe 2025 with one word or phrase, what would it be? 1 minute each, and Felix, why don't you take us off?
Thank you. I would describe it as a year of transformation. It's a year where we shifted from a traditional busy year to a period of fundamental agency evolution. We had, as Susan pointed out, an expansion of jurisdiction, and we had a historic shift in workload, a surge in workload. We absorbed 2 major new jurisdictions, the jurisdiction of AB 288, which would be private sector workers, and AB 1340, which is the Rideshare Drivers Act, the TNC Act, and California's rideshare drivers. We also managed a historic surge in cases. We had almost a doubling of cases starting last summer and continuing today. That was somewhat unexpected, which required us to reconsider our processes and transform. And of course, as always, labor strikes are part of our work, but we had a significant change in the nature of the strikes, the size and the scope. So these events transformed the way that we look at our processes and our workflows, and we need to become, and we knew we needed to become a more effective and efficient organization.
Okay, thank you. Up next, Eric Koo.
Good morning and thank you. So I'm going to cheat a little bit, and my word is really going to be sort of a sigh of relief. 2025 was a little bit nuts. It was a pretty hectic year for the agency. I think right off the bat, when the year started, we had the Southern California wildfires, which impacted operations down in the LA office. We had the grand sort of reopening of our San Francisco regional office and the brand new hearing room up there, which was a great moment for us. As Felix mentioned, there has been a very large influx of cases in the past year. On top of that, we've been monitoring and then preparing for pretty significant and unique increases to our jurisdiction. As Susan mentioned in her introduction, we did we produced for the first time some sort of public-facing training videos that describe our process. And of course, I think all of us here in California have been sort of observers of the ongoing political conflict between the state and the federal government. And so after all that, I'm just sort of glad we survived and we're still standing here in January 2026. And I don't necessarily wish that this year is less eventful, but I do hope it's a little bit more steady.
Thank you. Chair Banks.
I wish I could take credit for this, but I remember Krantz on our board said it best when he said, anchored in rough seas. Since 2017, when we started the case processing efficiency initiative, we've done a lot of work to build the organization, make it stronger, and anticipate any unknown changes that may come our way. And we stayed afloat, but 2025 clearly was a stress test for us.
Very well said. Thank you, Chair Banks. Before Jerry takes this question, I would like to ask if you could please set up the work that you've been doing in response to the situation with the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Services.
Thanks, Susan, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I really appreciate it. In the middle of March of last year in 2025, the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service shrunk significantly with the services that they can provide to their private sector constituents. Thankfully, SMCS, we were founded primarily at our start as a private sector mediation service. Eventually, in the 1950s, public sector statutes started to being passed into the 60s and 70s with the creation of PERB. So we still have that jurisdiction. So we've taken on and been able to service our constituents in the private sector over this past year, and they've been really appreciative of that work. And I'll get into more detail about how we've been able to handle the increased caseload as well. But that's been a big shift for us. And I'll go into saying that the one word that I think in light of that I would describe this last year for State Mediation and Conciliation Service is tectonic, which is appropriate for this state that we're in. Again, it was largely unprecedented since our founding in 1947. And while we took on private sector cases solely back then, we balanced our caseload with FMCS, and we've taken on most of their caseload minus larger impasses throughout the state of California and healthcare work within the state of California.
Thank you, Jerry. Our next question is, to meet the 2025 challenge or opportunities, did you change the way you and your division approach case processing? Did it work? And if so, do you plan to continue it? And for this one, we'll go in the same order as the first part, and we'll start with Felix.
So we absolutely had to change the way we did things. We had to rethink the OGC engine. We had to recognize that this record high filings in new jurisdictions made our traditional processes unsustainable. So we had to shift away from the inefficiencies that were built into our process just over time and to prioritize the legal substantive casework that is the meat and potatoes of our job. So our effort was to eliminate transactional friction, identify these inefficiencies, remove them, and replace them with more efficient processes. So what we did was we streamlined the OGC workflow first. We looked at our processes end to end, and we rethought everything from the initial intake all the way through the case determination to make sure we were doing everything as efficient as possible. We also have new standards for our work product. We are prioritizing shorter, punchier documents. We utilize standardized legal frameworks when we can. And of course, within the OGC office, we share our best practices with each other so that we're all updating ourselves on what works best and what doesn't work. But the real secret sauce, I think, is that we restructured the OGC. We have brought in attorney supervisors. You have to think of these individuals as our quality control folks. They act as a vital layer of protection for legal accuracy to make sure that our documents that go out the door are high quality work products and are as accurate as possible. This ensures that our rulings are consistent statewide regardless of whatever regional office it comes out. And we also have attorney fours, which are these specialized positions where we have these independent, highly trained labor lawyers who take on the more complex work, which sort of frees up a lot of the other attorneys to just do our meat and potatoes work. And of course, you have to also think about your tech. Tech changes very quickly, so we had to leverage tech in a way that made us more efficient. Keeping up with technological changes, updating PERB, finding ways to get these marginal gains by making these small tweaks was important for us. So, the system philosophy was to design a system that works for the attorneys and not the other way around. So looking ahead, I think in 2026, we're going to keep all of these ideas in mind, that we have to look at these different systems and functions, structures, and constantly tweak them to make sure they're keeping up with what's happening outside of PERB, the new jurisdictions, the increased casework, etc. These are permanent structural changes, not temporary fixes. We want to also enhance mentorship and training. And our final goal is to build an agency that's faster, smarter, and more formidable.
Thank you, Felix. I do want to piggyback on that and take a quick moment to thank the Department of Finance and CalHR both for their work on restructuring the attorney classification series and for making it possible for us to move to this new structure this past year. It was a collaborative project that was years in the making, and I hope they are seeing the same positive results statewide that we are seeing here at PERB. Next up, Eric Koo, same question.
All right, thank you. So in 2025, we continued with an initiative that we began in 2024, which is really to start focusing on the quality of our work product, the outgoing proposed decisions, and that meant additional review, training, reviewing documents, templates, research resources. And so I'm hopeful that the parties are starting to notice the fruits of those efforts, but they will be continuing and sort of iterating in 2026 as well. On top of that, we are also looking at ways to improve our hearing spaces and hearing processes to better suit the needs of modern parties. As one sort of quick example, in 2025, we started to look at Zoom as a platform for doing video conferences for our virtual proceedings. And as testing has been successful, it looks like that's going to roll out division-wide sometime later this year. There are other, we also have a couple of projects working with the OGC in terms of just ways to make the scheduling and assignments process go more smoothly. In addition to that, we're also developing and sort of iterating on how to address and deal with the increased amount of in-person hearing activity. We did have a pretty big swell of incoming cases. When we did this talk last year about 2024, I think I reported out that we had about 81 active cases. This year that number is about 40% higher, and it's really made us have to rethink what we're doing in terms of assignments. A lot of those changes are internal, sort of under the hood things that we are trying to do internally. But externally, I think the parties that are appearing before us are going to start to notice we are doing things such as reassigning cases as one ALJ's calendar gets full and another's loosens up. Sometimes you will see the Deputy Chief ALJ and I contacting the parties before assignments are made, and that's again to make the scheduling and assignment process go more smoothly. And of course, once again, thank you to Finance and CalHR. We've also had the opportunity to hire additional staff, which I do hope is going to help us with our caseload. And so we have a limited term ALJ that started just this month actually, and we also have a support staff person who is specializing in the ALJ workflow. And finally, I want to put out a plug for our training videos that Susan mentioned in her opening remarks. Basically, there are little digestible bits that I think about all the different processes at PERB, and I think that it's going to be useful for everybody who is accessing any part of what we do. But I'm particularly hopeful that it's going to work well for the ALJ division, just because our hearings tend to be very procedure heavy, and we're hoping that it'll help inexperienced parties with dealing with how to navigate that and hopefully make the hearings themselves go more efficiently. Thank you.
Yes, I'm also very hopeful that we can continue the outreach efforts that we started last year. We are committed to making sure PERB services are available to all constituents, even those without legal training. Up next, Chair Banks.
Well, if I have any say in it, we are going to continue the outreach efforts. So I think they're really important for our constituents. In terms of case processing at the board, we didn't change much. The board's docket has remained, not to brag, but to brag, historically low, hovering around 10 cases. And contrasting to 2018, when we had over 80 cases in the docket, with over half of them more than 2 years old, we now have about 10 to 12 cases at a given time, and we're deciding cases within 4 to 6 months. That has given us a bit of a breathing room to be more proactive in other things like regulations. I have been establishing subcommittees at the board to start early with 2 members working with the Office of the General Counsel to promulgate regulations to help move those along so they're a bit more refined when they get to the board for first review. And that was really seen once Governor Newsom publicly announced that he was going to sign the TNC Act, AB 1340. We got to work on regulations, given what we knew from the current statute as it existed and what we could import from our current regs. Keeping with those 2 new regs, because AB 288 and AB 1340, the TNC Act, and AB 288, which gives us jurisdiction over private sector cases, did move PERB into a new realm of being. And so we did spend a lot of time looking at parallels in other states. New York passed a law similar to AB 288, and Massachusetts passed a law similar to AB 1340. And we spent a lot of time studying those to see how they implemented them, what worked, what didn't work, and what best practices we could take in developing our own regs. So we continue, and we will continue to be more actively involved in reg packages early on. And if you've been watching us or seeing what we do, the board has now moved into a continuous rulemaking process. And so we plan to continue that into the future. Thanks.
Thank you. And finally, Jerry, tell us about how SMCS tackled all that you had coming your way.
Thank you. Yes. Thankfully, SMCS has been able to bring in 4 of our retired annuitants who've been willing to help us out with regards to the increased caseload that I mentioned earlier. And we are also hoping to bring in more permanent mediators because the caseload influx continues to rise as more of our constituents in the private sector are aware of it. And while we normally offer to go to the locations of the parties to hear the mediation dispute in person, and we do offer video conference software, for our private sector grievance mediation, we've had to limit that to video conference only for the time being. But my understanding is that many, if not all of these types of mediations previously were handled by the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service in that same manner. So we do hope that we are able to bring in some more permanent mediators so we can handle this influx. But I will say that we have had really good input from our constituents in the private sector, labor unions, employees, employers, who are very happy that we're able to provide this service to our constituents in the private sector.
Thank you so much, Jerry. Okay, next question. Staying in 2025, what would you point to as a lesson learned, key decision, regulations, or other things that our constituents should keep in mind or pay closer attention to in 2026? Did you see any patterns or practice that consistently occurred in 2025 that you believe will carry into this year? Jerry, we'll stick with you again.
Okay, thanks. Yes. It's probably obvious and it applies to all divisions of PERB, but expect the unexpected. Looking at what happened in 2025, we had to be willing to adapt to changes in state mediation and conciliation service. And thankfully, we had original jurisdiction in the private sector, but we were able to handle these, as I mentioned previously, but we're still receiving more requests from private sector employers and unions who have just discovered that we can provide the service, even though we've been doing it since March. And as such, I expect for even more private sector mediation as people realize that we can provide the services. And we hope to be able to finance and additional mediators to be able to handle that this influx. Currently, we're at 380 additional cases from what we normally handled, and that's from March of 2025 to the present.
Thank you, Jerry. And yes, that is a good point. We will be closely monitoring the workload so that we can make sure that we're able to keep responding to these requests this year. Up next, Felix.
So I would say that the lesson learned, is to turn my mic on before I start speaking, is that you know, the best laid plans can go out the window pretty quickly. We started with a roadmap, and the year had other ideas for us. And so a lesson for me is, you know, be prepared for things to change and change rapidly. We had this, again, this triple threat that we faced. This historic surge where our unfair practice filings had already matched the annual filings 6 months into the fiscal year. A new jurisdiction, and I haven't noted, but AB 1340 alone gave us about 800,000 new individuals under our jurisdiction. That's a massive increase in our jurisdiction. And AB 288, of course, because it involves all private sector workers, is also extremely large. And then the strikes, the scope of them. Again, I'll point out that the LA County strike that we dealt with last year involved 18 different bargaining units, all represented by SEIU, with over 52,000 employees, and many of them in healthcare classifications. So it became obvious that our traditional systems simply weren't built for this level of intensity, and so we had to change. So for me, the lesson is be ready to pivot. You know, agility over steady is important, right? In our line of work, steady is a myth. You know, we have to react to new challenges, and we have to react quickly and efficiently and effectively. You know, so we learned that we just didn't move faster, but we cleared the mountain of cases that were coming in at breakneck speed, so we could handle other priorities like the TNC Act that requires quite a bit of our time. And I think it was helpful to know that you have to look at your structures. We learned that you know, our current structure in 2024 wasn't built for what we were going to face in 2025 and on. And so again, we're really grateful for receiving the attorney supervisors, for receiving the attorney fours, and additional staffing. Again, I believe that one of the biggest lessons is that technology can be your friend if you stay ahead of it and stay with it and learn how to use it in a way that makes your job more efficient and more effective. So even though we're attorneys and, you know, we're not techies, we have no excuse not to try to keep up with what's the latest in the world of technology, so that we can leverage that to make our job easier, faster, and better, which eventually serves our constituents. So you know, as we look ahead into 2026 and we look at these lessons that we learned and applied last year, you know, we realize that we haven't solved everything, but we are now better anchored for this type of change. We need to invest in the future. We constantly need to look at that. We need to ramp up training to bake agility into our attorneys' DNA from day one. You know, I think we met the storm, we learned from it, and we're ready for the next inflection point. You're not just surviving, you're evolving, and that's sort of our motto, and that's something we're going to kind of keep as we move into 2026 and on.
Well, that's a good way to look at the silver lining. Thank you, Felix. Up next, Chair Banks.
Thanks, I did love that, Felix. In looking at 2025, there are a lot of things. One thing was abundantly clear. PERB is no longer a public employment relations board. And the labor relations landscape is changing faster than I think it ever has in my time in labor relations. And to Felix's point, we have to be ready, not only to anticipate future challenges, but to anticipate what skills, needs, and abilities will have to instill in our staff to meet those challenges. I think it's exciting, but it's also extremely stressful. We've seen that this year with the number of strike activity. We all were scratching our heads, wondering what was going on, because it seemed like there wasn't anything out of the ordinary that would make strikes more intense than they were before. Sure the hell not a 55,000 worker strike in Los Angeles, right? That was out of question. So we're going to keep our eye on the strikes and see if they continue. I mean, maybe this is an activated workforce, the post-COVID workforce that people have anticipated. And an active membership in the union does mean more work for PERB. And the other thing that I think is one thing that I learned from this year is embrace change in the unexpected, because you have no choice but to roll with it. On the case front, PERB has been dealing with many of the issues the rest of the world has been dealing with, and that's AI. It's everywhere. You turn your phone on, there's an AI chatbot trying to help you with your questions and your answers. People have told me about their kids using it for their homework. And we've realized that our constituents are using AI in their filings at PERB. And AI, while a very powerful tool, does make mistakes. And we have seen mistakes being made, cases that don't exist, statements of law that we've never said. And so in response to that, the board addressed it in Atwater Elementary Teachers Association, PERB decision number 2955. And it was a very clear warning to our parties that no charge, appeal, response, reply, or any other filing before PERB should contain any citations or statements of law that are fabricated. And we went on to say that we put parties on notice that if you do that, any fabricated cases or statements of law, it'll warrant serious consequences, including but not limited to striking your filing, dismissing your charge, monetary sanctions, and if you're an attorney, we may report you to the California State Bar. Another trend we've seen this year is a rise in severance petitions. And severance petitions are relatively rare because the board has a very strict standard. And so if you are thinking of taking a unit, a group of employees out of a unit, severing them, please pay attention to these cases. Fresno Unified School District, PERB order number 8531, County of Kern, PERB decision 2975, and the City and County of San Francisco, PERB order 8532. Where we clarified the multiple issues related to severance petitions. I got 1 minute. I'm going to bounce through these last two really quick. Other two cases of note: Rockland Unified School District, PERB decision number 2939. PERB has found itself getting more involved in more charges being related to more hot topic social issues. And in this case, the board found that a school district violated ERA when it amended its parental rights and non-discrimination policy to require teachers to notify a student's parent within 3 days of learning of their transgender or non-conforming status. The board found that not only was this a change in working conditions, but it also was against the law with a recent law the legislature had passed. And the other interesting case, for any of you that are doing peace officer work, my time is up, but I'm going to take a few more seconds. In Trustees of California State University Stanislaw, PERB decision number 2940, the board clarified how California's Supreme Court's landmark Pitches decision impacts requests for information about peace officers. So if you do work with peace officers, it's an interesting case for you to look at. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair Banks. If you didn't know, the board's AI case made the news recently. If you're interested, you can find the article on the SACB State Worker page. Next up is Eric Koo.
Thank you. See if I can make up some of the time on the back end. I took this question, excuse me, as a chance to sort of look back at 2025 and examine any kind of trends that I saw and sort of mine those for anything that might be useful for either our division, for the agency, or for the public. And in 2025, unilateral changes and discrimination retaliation claims continue to be the most common issues that are in our outgoing proposed decisions from the ALJs. I think that's been fairly consistent over the years, but one thing that did change, and it caught my eye, was that new incoming hearings for the first time, HERA cases involving public university employees, took the number 2 spot in terms of new incoming hearings. That spot had usually or historically been occupied by MMBA cases involving cities, counties, and special districts. And sort of the number 1 spot was and continues to be ERA cases involving public school employees. Now, it's hard to say if that trend is going to continue into 2026, but I will say is that it has not yet translated to an increased percentage of HERA cases in the outgoing proposed decisions. ERA and MMBA still are at the top of the list as far as outgoing decisions goes. And speaking of trends, as Chair Banks mentioned, AI I think is a big issue throughout the state, and PERB is also no stranger to it. I think people are still trying to figure out how to use and employ AI tools effectively. And in 2025, I think our division has seen what might have been the first AI hallucination in a brief before one of our ALJs. And without getting into specifics, it did not go over well for that filer. And I'm very grateful for the board's decision in Atwater that Chair Banks mentioned. I think it really outlines the fact that as an agency, we're taking it very seriously, and there are also very serious consequences if you use AI without checking on it. So please, if you're going to employ AI tools, employ them carefully and with oversight. And finally, the last thing I want to highlight that I found interesting about this past year is just how often social and political, these kinds of other issues are making their way into unfair practice charges and into our hearings. For example, in this past year, we've seen cases about return to office orders, the rights for students to protest on public university campuses, and also parental notification rules. And now I'm not going to speak to the wisdom of whether that's a good idea to bring those cases to PERB, but it did strike me as how easy it is for a charging party to frame a social issue as a labor relations matter. And to me, I think it speaks to the fact that here in California especially, that the sort of the workforce and it is so ingrained in our other facets of life that it is very interconnected. And so for me personally, it's very humbling to see that that we do have these issues to contend with, and we try to do it with care, even if the focus of our attention is really whether the labor relations component to it and whether any statutory rights were being violated.
Thank you, Eric. Question 3 actually comes from our constituents. PERB's State Mediation and Conciliation Services, SMCS, has already been picking up federal mediations as a result of cuts to the federal mediation and conciliation services. In the last legislative session, Governor Newsom signed AB 1340, what we call the TNC Act, giving rideshare drivers the right to unionize under PERB jurisdiction. The governor also signed AB 288, giving PERB jurisdiction over private sector labor disputes and elections when the federal National Labor Relations Board does not fulfill its duties within a timely manner. How does PERB balance these new demands, including private sector grievance mediation, AB 288 and 1340, without returning to the backlogs of the past? And for this one, Chair Banks, we'll start with you.
I love that our constituents are paying attention to this, because this is the fear of returning to those backlogs of the not so distant past are the one thing that does keep me up at night. And I think no one liked that time, no one felt good at that time, and I think the trust in PERB had eroded significantly during that time. So we have been working very hard to address those things, knowing that new statutes are becoming away. I think Eric and Felix have both talked to the work they're doing to shore up the skills building in their divisions. But one thing is very different about these two, AB 288 and AB 1340, that were uncharacteristic of other statutes in the past. These came with funding allocations to actually pay for the true cost of the work that we're going to pick up. That's a testament to the legislature for understanding that we need to be resourced to do the work that we're given, but also to you, Susan, our executive director, who really has done an amazing job. I love the fact that I get to work with her every day and work on things like seeing that she understands clearly what every single thing costs, how much each new jurisdiction will bring to us, and we're very clear in our request for those in our budget allocations. So this is unlike 2001, which many of us still think about when we gained jurisdiction of the Myers-Briggs-Brown Act. Our caseload doubled and we received about $300,000 to carry the load, which was insufficient, and that's where we saw the backlog really drive. We never wanted to go back to where that was before. Other things, the legislature did give us some money one time that we were able to use in the last fiscal year to help get ready for AB 1340 and AB 288. Also, AB 288 is largely enjoined right now, so there's not a lot of work coming our way there until it works its way through the courts. But we are spending time litigating it, so that is actually taking some attorney time away from case processing. And while AB 1340 is certainly a big one, we haven't really seen much case processing yet because there hasn't been a certification of a union. But behind the scenes, our staff have been working a lot on the data and IT component, which hopefully when up and running will help us keep case processing moving along. So we are on it, we are working, and our expectation to our constituents who are worried about this is that we will not ever return to those backlogs. And on the federal mediation front, that work continues to outpace our public sector mediation requests. And this is a chance that I say it all the time, and I want to say it one more time here publicly. Our mediation division, state mediation and conciliation services, are the biggest rock stars. Stepping up, standing up, when the work started coming our way, and Jerry and I and Susan sat down to talk about it, Jerry stood up and said, we could definitely do this, and we'll do whatever we can to make sure that we maintain labor peace in the private and the public sector. We are continuing to watch this though, because we don't want that private sector mediation outpaces or takes up so much work that it disadvantages our public sector clients or constituents. So that's something we're also continuing to watch, but right now we're holding strong, and I can't thank the mediation division enough for their work on this.
Thank you, Eric. And just to piggyback on that a little bit, I think we're all very grateful for the budget allocation that resulted in additional staff members to handle the work. And something I always say is, money doesn't do the work, people do the work. And we appreciate all those who have joined us recently to take on these challenges. What a time to start. I also think it's about a 10% growth to our department in both positions and budget. And then I also, just a real quick thank you to the Admin Services Division for working on hiring, the onboarding, the purchasing supplies, and getting everybody set up and ready with IT services. All the work behind the scenes is very much appreciated. Eric Koo, you're next.
Thank you, and I agree, it's a great question. I think it really shows where the constituency is focused, and I appreciate it. There is only so much sort of ALJs can do to prepare for a big influx of cases or new jurisdiction, but I will say that we are sort of actively preparing to meet the moment that we're in. I already highlighted a couple of things that we have going on, including augmenting our staffing, modernizing our process, modernizing our hearings, training videos, and internal training efforts. We really hope that these kinds of things that we're doing today are going to help us to absorb any big swell in cases in the future. Now, I do want to mention that sort of the last big sea change that we saw, as Chair Banks had mentioned, was around 2001 when PERB absorbed a huge chunk of jurisdiction based on taking on a large part of the MMBA. And believe it or not, I was one of the employees who was at PERB not long after that change happened. And I can say this moment today feels different. It doesn't feel like it did back then. I think back then there was sort of this attitude of, well, just do your best and we'll just keep going. I think this time around, once again, as Chair Banks mentioned, and as Susan also highlighted, I think the legislature and the constituents who are, who were backing this legislation was much more intentional about resourcing PERB to actually handle what we anticipate the increase of work to be. And also internally, we've heard from Felix and from Jerry just about steps that we're taking to really be ready, be intentional, not to repeat the mistakes that we had made a few decades ago, and to really stay on top of things. And so I'm hopeful, even though it does look like a big moment, I'm hopeful that we really can tackle it effectively.
Thank you, Eric. And one of the things we celebrated last year was your 20-year anniversary at PERB, which also makes you our longest standing PERB employee.
Old timer.
Up next, Jerry, and Jerry's actually was with SMCS before when they were under the Department of Industrial Relations instead of PERB. So
Yes.
you're also a historian of your division.
Oh, thank you. And I wanted to first thank the constituent who submitted that question and just encourage our other constituents, people who are watching, if you have any questions that follow this, to definitely follow up with any of us if there's things you have questions about. And thank you, Chair Banks, for those kind words for our staff. I will echo that. We have a staff at SMCS mediators and support that work tirelessly with parties. And that's the one thing that we want to ensure, that with the influx of, now it's up to 380, it'll soon be over 400 additional cases, that we're able to service our frequent flyers, the people who have relied on us for a number of years, and also to ensure that work stoppages or strikes can be averted by us coming in to help out the parties resolve their issues. As recently as yesterday, we were involved in stopping a strike in the Imperial Valley. So we will continue to do that, and we've kept that in mind, and so that's very important. But I want to thank our staff for their gargantuan and tireless efforts through this process, and they continue to be really enthusiastic about helping all of you out there. I understand too from our public sector constituents, a lot of times with impasses you have timelines, and so we are very cognizant of that, and one of the reasons why we had to, I would love to be able to have come out in person for private sector grievance mediations, but given the travel of the mediators out to your locations for public sector work and for impasse work in the private sector, we at this point aren't able to do that without creating some backlogs of timelines for mediation, and we don't want that. So we're doing that. The retired annuitants, I'm so glad that they've been willing to come back and to go out of their retirement and to come in and help us with regards to mediation. There's 4 of them that have been just tireless with their efforts as well too, to help our constituents out, and that's really helped for the time being. But ultimately, what we want to do is look at bringing on more full-time mediators, so we don't have any situation, because there's only so much time that retired annuitants can do during a year. And so we will continue to work on getting those more permanent mediators. And but if there's any kind of concerns about timing or whatever, I'm always available as a director to address any of your concerns, but so far we've been able to handle it with those circumstances that I just illustrated.
Wonderful, thank you, Jerry. And it looks like the way things are going, we'll definitely have the data to back up that request. Okay, up next is Felix.
So the question doesn't surprise me, because I recall as a practicing labor attorney, the frustration I felt when our cases sort of languished at PERB. And so I understand the importance of making sure that the backlog doesn't grow, if anything, shrinking it as much as possible, and getting these cases moved through quickly, because we know that a labor dispute that languishes only gets worse and it becomes harder to manage. A lot of these culminate into strikes and other workplace disputes that could have been resolved earlier if we could get to these disputes quicker. And so I'm very committed to making sure that the backlog doesn't grow, and that we continue to improve our processing times. I'm not happy where we're at now. And this is an area that I'm going to continue to pursue within the OGC. Last year, what made it challenging, of course, were the same things I mentioned before, which is, we had this this landscape shift. We had this increase of filings that we didn't see coming. The 2 new jurisdictions, and it's important to point out these are private sector jurisdictions, both of them, TNC Act and AB 288. The rideshare drivers are not public employees, and these aren't the first group of employees that we receive that aren't public. We also have childcare providers under our jurisdiction. So yeah, we sharpened our axe. We looked at our structure, we looked at our processes, our streamline, our technology, and did all these things to ensure that we don't have our backlog grow. But ultimately, I think what we have to recognize is that efficiency has a ceiling. We can sharpen the axe all day long, but eventually we need more people to cut the wood. And this is where I think it's been so grateful that we've received the support from agency, from finance, from the legislature, from the governor's office in funding the staffing needs that we have now, that our circumstances have significantly changed. Because we know process alone can't handle the current surge that we're dealing with. To maintain our speed and efficiency without the backlog growing, and to maintain due process and quality, we need board agents and mediators. We need legal and administrative support staff, infrastructure and equipment. And so we're grateful that it's been delivered to us, because that's going to be a key to making sure that our backlog continues to stay low, that we continue to process cases quickly for our constituents, because our core mission is to resolve labor disputes. And if we can't get to them in an efficient and quick amount of time, our mission is going to be hampered. And so we appreciate that, that folks recognize this and have been providing us with what we need. Stability requires resources, and I'm glad to say that we're a humbler, smarter, and more resilient organization because of our changes. We've made pivots, but it's important to make sure that California labor relations remain stable, and the resources have to match the legislative mandates, and we're grateful for all the assistance we've gotten. So we're going to continue on that path to make sure our backlogs remain low.
Okay, thank you. Our last question, it's kind of a fun one. What would you recommend that the constituents pay attention to in 2026? Eric Koo, why don't you start us off?
Sure thing. So 2026, I think, is going to be a big year for PERB. First thing I want everyone to look out for is all of the 50th anniversary, other webinars, activities, receptions that we have going on. It's going to be, I think it's going to be an exciting year, and as Chair Banks had suggested, I really hope it's part of a sort of sustained effort on our behalf to reach out to the public, educate the public, and just invite them in to see what we're doing. And I think a couple people have mentioned this already, but when we're looking at sort of AB 1340, AB 288, they are so different than anything we've seen before, so it's really going to be interesting, but I don't know if any one of us really knows how much activity this is ultimately going to result for us, for our division. We just don't know yet how many additional hearings, just how much additional staffing we're going to need. And so we're doing our best to make sound predictions, but I think at some point we're just going to have to wait and see. Aside from those things, one thing that personally I will be looking out for is creativity coming out of the board level. This past year, we've seen the board being willing to do some sort of non-traditional approaches to case resolution. As a couple examples, we saw the board referring unfair practice charge matters to SMCS for potential resolution, I think when it looked like there might be a way to get to a resolution. In addition to that, the board has on some occasions remanded cases back to one of the case processing divisions to gather further information in order to make sort of a decision based on a more complete record. Boards also recently taken a couple of cases up to decide on its own. And so, it's not my place to talk about the board's strategy or goals there, but as an observer, I think it's really interesting, and I'm very curious to see what kind of things that the board is going to do this year.
Yes, Eric, thank you. Me too. I think we're all a little curious to see what comes out of our board. Next is Felix.
Okay, the first thing I would ask folks to pay attention to is the fact that the board is very involved in rulemaking at this point. We are, so in 2025, we built the foundations, and now in 2026, what you're gonna see is the rulemaking coming to life, and these rules are gonna be very important in case processing. You're gonna see rules around AB 1340, the Tennessee Act, as the board chair mentioned. The board quickly jumped onto these rules and is moving at breakneck speed to get them into place, as the law has already rolled out on January 1, 2026. And so those are in process. The other area we haven't really mentioned much is LERA, the Legislature Employer Relations Act. That passed a couple of years ago, but it becomes effective July 1 of 2026. And those rules are currently in formal rulemaking. And so what I would inform or advise our constituents is that that they should engage in the process. They should submit comments, show up to our board meetings to comment on items related to these rules to help shape them, because we want to ensure that the rules reflect the real world conditions at your workplaces. The other item I would say to pay attention to is board decisions, our presidential decisions. I think you should expect some significant decisions coming out this year, maybe even around the TNC Act or other new areas, or just refinement of certain areas of law and subjects that everybody should be aware. It's a good reminder that presidential board decisions are guides for the parties. So don't just check the outcome. What you need to do is read the legal reasoning to understand why the board decided the way it did. Your best defense against unfair practice is making sure you understand the standards as they're constantly being refined by the board. So staying briefed on the board is the best way to prevent unfair practices and to ensure management labor relations remain harmonious at the workplace. The other thing I always remind folks is that mediation services are there to assist you. I mentioned earlier that the problem with letting workplace disputes fester for too long is that they grow into bigger disputes and they become more difficult to manage. SMCS is an amazing division of PERB that does great work for us, and I think we aren't used enough. But the same applies for the OGC. If you got to the point where there's going to be a strike, we always remind folks that we're there to mediate line passes for parties. These go a long way into making sure that that strikes don't involve essential employees, and where the essential services remain intact during the strike. And so I would remind folks and pay attention to the fact that we can provide these services for you. It's also been mentioned that we've created these constituent toolboxes, these educational guides, webinars, and other materials to help you navigate our processes as those change. And so watch out on our website to see updates on constituent education materials and use them. They're very useful, they're very well made. So the idea is, to work together to see PERB as what we are, which is an agency committed to helping people foster harmonious labor relations at the workplace. And we have a lot of things we can do for you. They're available with a quick phone call, and we can get you the help you need.
I think that's great advice. Thank you, Felix. Up next, Jerry.
Well, thank you, Felix, for mentioning our services as well. And I want to give a happy birthday for PERB from your slightly older family member, SMCS. We've been under PERB since, a lot of you know, since 2012. But it's great to be part of this celebration. It'll be a fun year for all of us, and I'm really looking forward to a lot of what we have. From a mediation perspective for our constituents, I would pay close attention, as usual, to the economy statewide and nationwide and even local. As you know, for the public sector, almost all of our public sector contract mediations, the issues are typically salary and benefits, amongst others, of course, but they center on issues that are funded in budgets, local, statewide, and sometimes nationally. And so for our private sector constituents, I would pay attention to the health of the economy because it can have a direct effect on the profits that companies make, which in turn affects the what salaries and benefits a company can be able to afford. And also, I would keep an eye on the political landscape, both nationally, statewide, and locally. As I mentioned earlier, there were a lot of changes that have occurred in 2025, and it is best to be ready for similar challenges and changes in 2026.
Okay, great, thank you, Jerry. Chair Banks, we always appreciate having you give us this insight, so why don't you take it home?
It's always tricky when I'm out in public and even now hearing you all ponder what we're gonna do next. And what I'd love to opine on it, it'd be inappropriate, so. Just a couple things to keep in mind. To our parties, whether you're the charging party or the respondent party, please remember that you have a role in moving your case through our process. Every time you amend the charge, it adds time to the case processing. If you come unprepared to hearing, it adds time to the case processing. So while we're trying on our end to keep those down, we rely on you as well to do the best you can with your filings. And also to remember that every step of the way, mediation and settlement is always on the table. Regional attorneys are happy to help you in an informal. Your ALJ is happy to help you in an informal, and mediation division is always there. So finding the way to settle your dispute between the two of you is always better than actually going through and having us render a final decision. Please read our decisions carefully. We go out of our way. I was so happy this fall to hear Jen and Corey Summer at CalPELRA talk about our board decisions and how they're so instructive and how we make sure that we break down how and why we got to the determination that we did. Even if at times it means repeating areas of law that many of our more seasoned constituents may understand. But we try really hard to make our decisions, especially our presidential decisions, as clear and instructive as possible. As Felix said, this board is very active in rulemaking. And as I said previously, we will continue to be working on rulemaking packages. So if you've been practicing in front of PERB for a very long time and you're used to our regs and you think you've memorized them, please refresh them. If you have an old copy you've downloaded from our website, go to our website and look and see if there's an update, because every year we see people filing things based on regulations that are no longer relevant. So please look at them. We work very hard on them. Keeping with regulations for a second, there are numerous, as Felix mentioned, board, and I mentioned earlier, board subcommittees working on our right packages. We announce those when we announce our board meeting agendas. We also do e-alerts. If you've not signed up for those, please sign up for those. We love to have your input early in the process. It helps us make stronger, more robust regulations than having them all come at the back end where we've already spent a lot of time and effort. So be involved, be actively involved. We really do appreciate your input. And if there's other things you'd like us to consider, programming you'd like us to see, please reach out to us. Is it PERB questions? Yeah. PERB questions at perb.ca.gov. And I would be remiss if I did not plug our 50th anniversary. We have a series of webinars set for this year and other programming. Please, again, sign up for those alerts because we'll be keeping you informed throughout the year. So thank you.
Okay, great. We'll take a moment to just give everybody a chance to comment one more time with some closing thoughts. Felix, we'll start again with you.
So I always like this opportunity to remind our constituents of what our mission is, why we're here, and the value of labor relations and the laws that allow us to have robust labor relations in California. So, so these aren't just hurdles for the parties. These are a framework for stability and clear communication between the parties. We want to replace workplace strife with a structured, predictable process resolving conflict. And the idea is to level the playing field by We believe that by protecting the right to organize and bargain, we ensure the state's critical work doesn't stop. Whether that's in the classroom or a healthcare setting or a water plant or any other public or now private place. So for employees, it's a genuine seat at the table. And for employers, it's a clear, predictable framework for personnel management. So our mission is really about accountability and respect, right? Our core mission remains unchanged even when we pick up these new jurisdictions. It's to foster harmonious labor relations, to have people communicate with each other and resolve their own workplace disputes in a respectful way, in a way that benefits both sides. What we're trying to do is foster a culture of respect at the workplace. We want to ensure fair processes and make sure that parties are treated with dignity and the respect that they deserve. So the bottom line is, this is about the public interest. When labor relations are balanced and predictable, the entire public wins. And so thank you for your partnership in keeping California moving forward.
Great, thank you. Eric Koop?
Thank you. I think in terms of closing remarks, what I really want to say is just thank you to all of you for supporting PERB and its mission over the past 50 years. I think we are fortunate to have sort of an active constituency that really cares about these things, and it's easier to bring back to our staff and say, look, this is important. People are paying attention to this, and it matters. And so we're just grateful that we do have that, and people are looking at us, that they are paying attention, and that they are appreciating it when we put out good work. And so we're hopeful to use the resources entrusted to us effectively, and we look forward to advancing labor relations into the next 50 years. And I do want to part with one last line. It's very similar to what Felix said, is parties are highly encouraged to reach out to, if you have a case in front of our division, you're highly encouraged to reach out to either your ALJ, reach out to me, if you think some kind of mediated resolution is possible. If we find out early enough, we can bring resources to bear to help you. And as Felix just said, I truly believe that negotiated resolutions provide sort of the most predictable and sort of durable piece in the workplace.
Okay, wonderful. Jerry, closing thoughts.
Thank you, and I want to start with a couple of thank yous. So a big thank you to all of you, our constituents out there who are watching and who are maybe watching this later. Thank you for participating. Your input is always very helpful. And thank you to PERB as an agency for all the support that they continue to give State Mediation and Conciliation Service, and to the state of California for all the support that they give to our agency at PERB and SMCS. I will say that I wanted to add that to a lot of the comments, that you don't necessarily have to wait until a formal mediation process is outlined in an impasse procedure. You can contact us sooner for pre-impasse and for other services, and our services are outlined on our website. But feel free to reach out to us. I'll be happy to talk to you about what services we can provide. People sometimes don't realize we also provide a service where there's conflict between two employees at the workplace as well too. And so those are things that we have, and I think if you continue to look at what services you can have, you can have a better 2026 because we can send our mediators in early. And finally, I'd like to thank our staff for their tireless efforts in supporting mediation throughout the state of California.
All right, thank you. And Chair Banks.
Turning 50 and looking, having the pleasure of being on the board now for over 13 years, looking to where we started when I first started the board, where we are now, we've come a very long way. And I think it's equal part to the dedication of our staff, but also to the engagement of our constituents, who have really given great feedback and input to us to help us improve our process, but also to our staff, who are Felix, Jerry, and Eric, and Susan, and even your staff, Jarrell, and who really are every day wondering what's going to come my way today, and how do we deal with it. I think you're all doing an amazing job. And we're gonna make some mistakes along the way, but we're gonna get through it. And I'm really excited to see that we are in a place now where our constituents now expect and believe that their charges will be processed quickly. In the past, we had governors veto legislation that would expand our jurisdiction because, quote, we couldn't handle it. And now we have Governor Newsom signing 2 landmark pieces of legislation because he knows that we can handle it. I want to thank Governor Newsom for that and the legislature for their trust in us. And again, our partners at Labor Agency, Secretary Knox, Undersecretary Roberts, and Department of Finance, who've also really understanding how vital this agency is to labor peace in California. I'm also really happy that I work with a very engaged board. So on behalf of my members Krantz, Paulson, Kraus, and Ortega, thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for being a part of making PERB the agency that it is. We're going to continue to develop our outreach efforts, if I have any say, and education efforts in 2026 and beyond as our resources permit. So let us know what you'd like to see. Let us know how we can be more helpful. And we would do our best to make sure that we can meet that. So please look forward to seeing you throughout the year as we celebrate our 50th anniversary. And on behalf of us all, thank you very much.
Okay, I'd like to thank the public for joining us today. I also want to thank the panel for coming here and preparing for this workshop for you all in spite of their heavy workloads. One of the things that we've heard a lot about is the change that happened last year. I'm also new in this role. I took over the reins from Joshua Golka in 2025 after over 6 years of him being in the position. And one of my first projects was to conclude the CPEI, which was largely finished at that time already. But what was interesting about it is it kept changing. And I finally said, we have to make a final report before things change again. So if you haven't checked that out, that's also available on our website, as is the PERB 50 Forward events and the training videos under the resources tab. Thank you all again. If you have any questions, please email us at perbquestions@perb.ca.gov. Thank you.
Thanks.